chapter 16. We'll be looking at the verses between 21 and 26, taking up our cross. There was a politician that was running for office, and he goes to a small town and he talks to the mayor, and he says, "Well, I'm here to help you. What do you guys need?" And the mayor says, "Well, we need two things. So first, we've got a hospital, but we don't have a doctor." So the politician said, "Well, just wait a minute." He pulls out his phone, he turns around, he dials, he's talking to somebody for a while, he comes back, says, "You're all taken care of. I got a doctor on the way. What's the second thing you need?" The mayor said, "We don't have any cell phone reception here." Not saying anything about politicians, just a joke. This morning we're going to be talking about taking up your cross. The first part of this is the hardest part, because to understand the cross, we have to understand what the cross was used for. Crucifixion was one of the most feared, one of the most cruel, one of the most brutal forms of execution that's ever been designed. Among the Jews, it was viewed not only as a terrible death, but as a shameful one. Criminals that were condemned to crucifixion were often severely scourged, sleep deprived, and physically exhausted before they even had to start on their way to their crucifixion. When the Romans condemned a criminal to crucifixion, typically they were forced to carry their own cross, sometimes not the entire structure, but the cross member at least, as they went to where they would be crucified. Now, if you've ever been so exhausted, it was hard to lift your arms or lift your head. If you're under 45, you probably don't know what I'm talking about yet. Until you get to the first time, when I was younger, I'd work all day, sit down for 15 minutes, get up and work some more. As I got older, I thought I'd do the same thing, but I learned after 45, 46, 47, once I hit that mark of being tired, I was just done. There wasn't a second round, right? And there's been times where now I know I just have to work till I can't, but then you come in so tired you can barely get your head up. Now imagine having to throw a 75, 80-pound piece of wood on your back that you have to carry up a hill. A back that's probably ripped open from the scourging. And then when they get to where they're going, of where they'd be crucified, they would lay the cross on the ground and they would lay the criminal on the cross. They'd put some rope around their arms so they couldn't jerk the wrist out of the way. They would take a spike and they would put it between the radius and the ulna. They'd hammer that into the wood. And they'd repeat it on the other side. Then they'd take a longer spike and they would put it right where the ankle does that crook into the foot. Right at that point. They would take one of the feet and they would knock that spike through that foot. Then they would take that foot, put it over the other foot, and hammer that into the wood. They would let them bend their knees. They would have the knees where they could slightly bend. And that's actually part of the torture. Then they would take it, slide it to a hole, stand it up, and let it drop in. On impact, you're taking the impact on the spikes in your wrist and the spike on your feet. All that jarring coming down. Then when you're on there, in order to breathe, and the reason they bend your knees is so you'll have to pull yourself up, pushing off of the spike that's through your feet and the ones in your wrist, just to get a breath. Because when you come back down, it compresses your lungs and your diaphragm, and you can't get full breaths. Most criminals would either die from suffocation or between the physical exhaustion, the sleep deprivation, the loss of blood, their heart would just give out on them. If after so many hours they were still alive, they would come in, they would break their legs because then they couldn't pull up to take a breath. So when we're talking about the cross, you have to understand how brutal an instrument it is. A lot of us wear crosses. When I'm not wearing a tie, I have a cross on. And I wear it proudly. But Jesus knew exactly what he was heading toward. And these verses this morning, we're going to talk about that a little bit. He said in Matthew 16, 24 through 26, and Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what good will it do a person if he gains the whole world but forfeits his soul? Or what will a person give in exchange for his soul? When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he made a prayer to God. And he said to God, if it be your will, if this is what you want, I would like this cup to pass from me. I would really like to not have to go through this. But if it's your will that this happen, then thy will be done. So when we translate that, it means, Father, I know this is going to be bad, and I'm worried about it. I fear it a little bit. And so if there's some way that we can avoid this, I would like to take that option. But if this is part of your will, I will do it. So think about the things that go into the crucifixion. Jesus is saying, I understand the pain. I understand the exhaustion. I understand the suffering. I understand the humility. I understand what this is going to do to my mother who will be watching. I understand what this is going to do to the rest of my family and my friends that are going to see this. But if it's your will, then Father, for you, I will do it. In these verses that we just read, Jesus is comparing crucifixion to discipleship, which seems to be an odd pairing. Because discipleship is one of the things that is supposed to make us grow. And yet he's saying, hey, if you want to be like me, you got to take up your cross. So how does that come to be? When we take up a cross, we are dying to ourselves. We are dying to our own will. We're surrendering that. We're giving that up. We're saying, I no longer am going to live for me. I'm going to live for you. And so the cost of discipleship is self-denial. Not what I want, what you want. Even though I know what I want is something I would rather not go through. It's something I would rather not do. I'm not looking forward to the pain. I'm not looking forward to being beaten and scourged. I'm not looking forward to having to carry a cross on a back that's now been torn to shreds. But if that's what you need from me, that's what I'll do. Because the alternative is saying, I'm not going to do that. And when you say that, you've given up your right to carry the cross. It's a choice that we have to make. Because the doctrine of the cross is, if the Master did it, then those who follow must do it. If that's what he did, that's what I must do. If that's what he endured, that's what I must endure. We have to travel the same road, and we have to deny ourselves from the things that make the earth so tempting. All those things that are comforts and conveniences of the earth. We have to give all those up. All the temporal interest and enjoyments, meaning all of those that are constricted by time, they won't go with you when you die. They stay here. But some people spend so much time collecting those things. And then here's the real kick. The base of self-denial is to say, even if my life is part of the bargain, I will give that to you. That is yours. But here's what I find to be the most interesting thing about these verses. We're in Matthew chapter 16. Jesus is not crucified till Matthew chapter 27. He has not been crucified. Nobody has even hinted at it. Nobody's suggested it. Nobody's thought of it. Nobody's considered it. But all of a sudden, Jesus says, if you want to follow me, you got to take up your cross. He knew what was going to happen. It wasn't something that he was speculating on. And even though he knew what the plan was, he kept working. He kept teaching. He kept loving. He kept guiding. He kept healing. He kept in conversation with his Father. You know, if I knew my wife was going to do something that was really going to hurt me, we probably would have a lot of discussions, but they wouldn't be loving ones, right? Like, why are you going to do this? And yet, in the garden, Jesus said, Dad, I need you. If you could take this from me, that would be great. But if you can't, I'll do it. And he knew exactly what was going to happen. How do we know that? We'll just back up a few verses. Matthew 16, 21 through 23. From that time, Jesus began to point out to his disciples that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and to suffer many things from the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and to be killed, and to be raised up on the third day. And yet Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord. This shall never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are not setting your mind on God's purposes, but men's. Now, in the verses right before this, Jesus had asked his disciples, Who do you say that I am? And Peter said, You are the rock. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said, That's right. And on this rock I'll build my church. And so they know exactly who Jesus is. They know that he is the Son of God. And he's just told them in plain language, I'm going to have to suffer and I'm going to have to die. And Peter said, That's not going to happen. Now, what's interesting is the way this is written in the Greek. This is one of the strongest negations in the Bible. This is Peter absolutely saying, I refuse to let this happen. So he's saying, Jesus, I don't care what you think about it. I am not going to let this happen to you. And what does Jesus say? Get behind me, Satan. In Matthew 4, Satan came and tempted Jesus. He tempted him with three things. The physical. Turn these stones to bread. You've been starved for 40 days. You could get something to eat. The second one was pride. He takes him up on the temple, says, jump off. The angels aren't going to let you hit the ground. They're going to come and swoop in and save you. And then the third one was obeying God's will. He said, bow down to me and I'll give you the earth. And each time, Jesus answers with scriptures. And now here's Peter trying to help Satan tempt Jesus into breaking that third temptation. Because Peter is saying, I don't care what the will of God is. I want what I want to happen. And I don't want you to go through this. Now, most of the time, if you say that to somebody, they say, well, thank you, I appreciate that. But that's not Jesus' reaction. He says, don't ever say that to me again. I mean, can you imagine Jesus looking at you and saying, you're Satan? I mean, it had to be devastating. Now, I love Peter because if there's somebody that's going to put his foot in his mouth, it's Peter. And I relate to that sometimes. But Peter wanted to gain the crown without the cross. And you cannot separate those two. You can't get it your way and still gain the crown. The cross is always going to be there in the middle. Jesus knew he had to die. He knew how he was going to die. And if it was up to him, nobody was going to stop him from dying. And not that he wanted to do it, but he knew he had to do it. And so he said, I am willing to do that. And then when he starts teaching his disciples, what does he say? You got to pick up your cross. You have to carry your cross. And so in verse 24 here, he gives 4 very specific demands. He said, number 1, you have to choose me. He said, if anyone wants to come after me, so you have to choose him. We have to pick him. We walk in his steps. We do what he did. Then second, he said, then you got to deny yourself. Don't do what you want to do. You have to do what I want you to do. That's what you're giving up. That is part of serving me. That's denying all the earthly comforts and conveniences. And that's saying, if it takes my life to deny myself, that is what I will do. Thirdly, he said, pick up your cross. Now remember, the cross is an instrument of death. I find it ironic that we wear that as a symbol of hope. Angie and I were talking about it this morning, and she said it's like wearing an electric chair around your neck because it's a brutal instrument of death. And yet what it means to us is we die to ourselves. We die to what we want. The old self has to go. That self has to die and get out of the way so that the new self can live. And to do that, we have to be carrying that cross. And then he says, follow me. Follow Jesus. Be in union with Jesus. Reflect the likeness of Jesus. And this is an active commitment. This is a daily walk. You don't pick up your cross once and then you never have to do it again. You pick that cross up every single day. And you take it with you everywhere you go. And you have to choose it every single day. And you have to choose it every single hour of every single day. And you have to choose it every single minute of every single hour of every single day. And then you have to choose it every single second of every single minute of every single hour of every single day. You've got to carry that cross. But here's the thing that makes this wonderful. My dad taught me this years ago. He said, picture a room. And on one side of this room is a cross. And on the other side of the room is a throne. And you can keep Jesus on that cross. And you can sit in that throne. And some people live good lives that way. But when they die, it's done. That's it. They don't take any of that stuff with them. Or you can take Jesus and put him on that throne and you go pick up your cross. Because Jesus didn't have us there to help him. Now, one of my favorite stories, or one of my favorite characters, we talked about him a little bit in class this morning, Simon of Cyrene. On the way to Golgotha, Jesus is carrying his cross and he just finally gives out. And they grab this guy named Simon. And they throw the cross on him and he's got to carry that cross. And it's recorded in each of the Gospels, in Matthew 27 and Mark 15 and in Luke 23. And if you know anything about me, the symbology that is screaming from this event is one of my favorite aspects of this story. Because Simon is doing the very thing that Jesus was preaching to his disciples in Matthew 16. Simon had to take up his cross and follow Jesus. That was his very role. He is fulfilling the very definition of discipleship in carrying that cross. And he had that ended up meaning something to Simon. In Mark 15:21, it says Simon's sons Alexander and Rufus become pillars of the church. Paul mentions Rufus in Romans 16:13. And as you notice, Paul mentions a lot of people that were very active and very instrumental to the church. The town of Cyrene played a role in the very first church, the church in Antioch, where we were first called Christians. The people in Cyrene had a lot to do with that. And I think it had a lot to do with Simon going back and telling what happened to him. Real Christianity takes real commitment. Real Christianity takes real commitment. It means we pledge our whole entire existence to God's service and God's will. And so, are you carrying your cross? Now, we are in a time that we're still hurting. It seems like our crosses have been made heavier. And when Simon went and helped Jesus with the physical cross, he could help him with that part of it. He couldn't take the spiritual burden. And the spiritual burden was what was really painful, because Jesus took every sin the world has ever seen on that cross with him. And he took something that had never happened in his life, a separation from God. Remember what he said on the cross? My God, why have you forsaken me? He had all the sins of the world on him, and that meant God couldn't be there. And that was the first time that Jesus ever felt that. We couldn't help him with that part. Simon couldn't help him with that part. He had to do that alone. But if you'll pick up your cross and keep him on that throne, he will help you with your burden. What does he tell us? My yoke is easy. My burden is light. So when we pick up that cross, we're not going to face the same torture that he did. He did that for us so that we never had to face it. But he still said, you still owe me a cross. I got on one for you. Now I want you to carry yours. And that means that everybody here has to focus on his strength. We have to focus on his love. That's the things that keep us going. That's the things that keep us from falling down. The things that encourage us and give us hope. But whenever you start to put yourself back on that throne, you're putting him right back up on that cross. You've thrown your cross down, and you've made yourself to be the most important. There's no denial, no self-denial when you're focused on yourself. We had great examples here of people who have focused on others. Rex, Tommy, all those others that we've lost. And what were they showing us? They were showing us how to pick up our cross and how to carry that. And you can see the results from the community and the church and all the other things that they've helped with. And what are we going to do about that? There's only one thing we can do. And that's to use that example to do the best we absolutely can. Because Tommy loved Christ. And Tommy reflected Christ. And if we want to see Tommy again, we have to love Christ and we have to reflect Christ. Now, a lot of us aren't going to have the same impact. That's okay. We have different gifts. But we need every single person here to give all they can. If we want this place to grow, and I don't care if it grows in numbers. I just want to see the spirit here grow. Because right now we're diminished. We're hurting. We got to get something back. Because that's the way that those who've gone ahead would want it. This coming Saturday, If you're interested in what's going on in the maintenance of the building, we're meeting here at 9 o'clock this coming Saturday to look at those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of things that Tommy and Larry have taken care of for years. And Larry's been telling me stuff that I wouldn't have even guessed about how things are set up. I love those things. That's the things that make this building unique. And like Josh told us about starting the tractor, sometimes it's not always, the perfect way. Sometimes we have to do it the way that just works, because that's what works for us. But the best way we can honor not only the love and the memory we have of those who've gone before, but our dedication to the Christ who went on the cross for you, is to pick up our own cross. Yeah, it's hard sometimes. Yeah, it's tiring sometimes. But He's there to help us if we'll let Him. We get so wrapped up in our own stuff sometimes that we start to let that cross go down. We're not carrying it up. It drops. And eventually we see a place where we can sit. And we sit down and we leave the cross laying there. And as soon as we give up, we've lost the very thing that makes us Christians. Let's not do that. Let's give all we can at all we can. Does that make sense? If you'll give everything you can to everything that we can find to do, things will go well. Bill and I were talking this morning. If you love your job, you never work a day. Can't remember who said that. I love that statement. And so that's the challenge this morning. Are you willing to carry your cross? And are you willing to help us heal through this time? It's going to take a while, but that's okay. God left brothers and sisters here that can also help us with those crosses. He did that intentionally, because sometimes it gets heavy for one person and we need to lean on somebody else. And so that's what I'll leave you with as we come to this invitation time. If that's something you need to work on, come to the front. Let's talk about it. We'll pray over you and we'll try to do better. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift His countenance upon you and give you peace. Let's all stand and sing.